There were 10. Patty.
That's what the lost came like, but I
They were
didn't get one.
I do have both sides, so the people from the outside and the inside. I'm leaving the
You get burnt.
Okay.
Oh, I use this one, so it's
I'm
bigger.
at lunch tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a little thicker.
You're paying
Hi,
attention.
I'm paying attention. How are you? Good to see you. Thank you.
I'm really coming along. You're getting, it's hard to figure out what you're doing, but you don't need. You're love you.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really enjoy when it's your turn.
Thank you.
First. And then you sit down.
Yeah, it didn't start yet.
Yeah, I You were doing.
I was there. That was my
The dentist, I drove.
I was.
Whenever you're ready.
So everything was fine.
Well, this is both.
I don't have any problems. Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. Yes. You better. So. So are you going to the whole baby thing? Oh, I am, good, and then you'll feel a little more comfortable joining us. Believe me if I tell you, none of us do the whole, you only want to do, okay. It's hard. We have Hebrew then come.
I lived 3 years.
Then you can Hebrew conversation.
I don't know. I had 2 children in Mexico. Divorced happily. Yeah, I gotta get it.
Good, how are you?
Actually,
I have no control. I have no control. That would be my idea, but I'm glad that you're comfortable. Like I'm obsessed with this whole album. This is the greatest. Like, hello, how are you? So nice to see you. Yeah. No, you're outside, huh? Not even to say you need me on the yeah.
That's okay.
All right.
They'll be very going.
These are all just. Okay, so we're on the same page. Yeah, and yeah, they remember and they get them out. They can have themselves. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I'm children, but I am trying.
Yeah, thank you.
That's why.
Hey.
Did you want to play cards? Yes, we have to, one of the and it was better if you watched it.
Okay, everybody, welcome.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Such good shooting. Okay, friends, we're gonna get started. She's online, I see, I heard, I saw her. Okay. Okay, everybody. Welcome, welcome. How is everybody doing?
Wonderful.
Wonderful, good, great, excellent. Okay, good words. Wonderful. So today we are wrapping up our series for this month of August on monumental moments. And that shape the generations, moments in Jewish time and Jewish history that shape the generations. And actually Robin is the one of the, was something that she had mentioned to me a while ago at the beginning, I think, sort of had me leading into this session. So Robin said something to me a few weeks ago about, I'm sure you're gonna talk about Israel in our Monumental Moments course on October 7th. And I was thinking about, there's so many different ways, you know, how would I bring in Israel to this course, knowing that it would be the final class. And so I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to talk about and what I wanted us to learn together and what I wanted us to study. And last night, I started to hone in on the notion of hope. Because I wanted to study Israel in this class, we only have an hour together, and I wanted to think about a moment and a word that came to my mind. Hatikva, the hope. So last night I was playing with Hatikva, I was playing with some poetry, I was trying to think about moments in the Jewish narrative that led to the moment of statehood. And so I was thinking a lot about the pioneers, the Chalutzim that came over from Russia and Europe and made their way to Israel in the Yeshuv, pre-statehood. They had a dream of Zion, of Zion. A dream that was the dream of our people for centuries, for millennia after the destruction of the temple, and we were sent out from the land of Israel and in diaspora, in Galut, in exile, and how our liturgy and our Talmud all started to come together with this notion of a return, a yearning for return, a return to Zion. And this hopefulness that in every moment that we would pray, that notion, that concept, that theme of a hope to return was ever present. And so I've been thinking about that, and I've been, you know, playing it over in my mind of, you know, we could go in so many different directions. We could focus just on the liturgy and this notion of return, return, return over and over again, day after day, praying, knowing that we would return. Focusing on the on the words of poetry and song that our people have created and written and sung along the same themes and topic, this yearning to come back to Israel. We are going to do that. We are going to look at the poetry. We're going to look at Hatikva itself, the anthem. We're going to explore how those words came to be, because I think they're just as significant and powerful as the liturgy itself, and its liturgy in its own form and fashion. And then this morning, the news from Israel of a hostage being rescued from by the IDF. Farhan al-Qadi, 52 years old, a Bedouin man, the father of 11 children. and a grandchild born while he's been in captivity for over 326 days. He was found in a tunnel in Gaza by a special IDF mission forces, brought him home to Israel. Which then my whole mind shifted and started to think about the idea of hope and how hope sustains and has kept those of our brothers and sisters who are in those tunnels or in those places of captivity, and how that yearning of a hope to return takes on new meaning, shape, sound, feel, as it rests on their heart and upon their lips, and yet the words are the same. Whether we're saying them here, their families are saying them, or centuries ago, our people's reciting them in far off lands. So I want to start our class with the words of Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael. It's the prayer that we recite for Israel, but also for the release of our captives. And I found a beautiful rendition of it this morning that was put out a few months ago by the hostage families, and particularly Zalman Media. So I want to play it. You're just gonna listen. We'll read the words afterwards, but I want you just to close your eyes and allow your body to move however it's going to move. Allow your heart to go where it's going to go. Allow your thoughts to travel while you listen to these words and to this melody. Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael, the voices of our brethren, the house of Israel, the children of Israel. So Ron, if you will, to please go ahead and play.
Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael, Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בגלה ובזמן קריב.
So just natural reactions.
Tears in my eyes.
Tears.
Powerful.
Sweet,
Mm,
and I think it's sad.
mm,
Hopeful.
hopeful.
I felt very pure.
Pure.
My reaction was a little different. Rather than reacting to the music, the words, I reacted to the photos of the hostages that just went on and on and on. Could you repeat? I didn't hear what you said.
She was focused on the pictures of the hostages being shown on the screen and how it just went on and on. So let's look at the words.
She'll make it bigger.
Yeah, no, I am, I just, there's so much on my screen, I can't. Okay, there we go.
It will get bigger.
Okay. So, Achenu Kol Beit Yisrael, as for our brothers or sisters, the whole house of Israel, who are given over to trouble or captivity, whether they abide on the sea or on the dry land, may the All-Present have mercy upon them and bring them forth from trouble to enlargement, from darkness to light, from subjection to redemption, now speedily and at a near time. So we start today with this beautiful song, poem, this idea that how wonderful that we wake up this morning and we hear of the redemption of one of our hostages, and thank God he is now home, back home in Israel. And that we pray for the redemption of all of our captives, that they may soon and speedily be returned home. And the idea that for centuries we have been reciting these words pre-statehood, pre-1948, this desire, this need to be brought home. From a religious and spiritual perspective, this idea that the people of Israel, the whole house of Israel, who are in other places, that they should be able to come to their spiritual homeland. That is a theme that we've seen over and over again in many different forms and different words and different songs and different prayers. And so I wanted us to take sort of a historical perspective of this notion of what hope means and what hope means from a Jewish perspective. And so Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a really beautiful quote. He says, "How the Jews invented hope. Judaism is a religion of details, but we miss the point if we do not sometimes step back and see the larger picture. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope. In a world serially threatened by despair, every ritual, every mitzvah, every syllable of the Jewish story, every element of Jewish law is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the blind acceptance of fate. Judaism is a sustained struggle, the greatest ever known, against the world that is, in the name of the world that could be, should be, but is not yet. There is no more challenging vocation. Throughout history, when human beings have sought hope, they have found it in the Jewish story. Judaism is the religion, and Israel the home of hope." Beautiful. What do you feel? How does this text resonate? And when we think about this idea of hope, and a hope, and that Israel, the home of hope, what does that mean to you?
I think it gives me hope in the fact that every story I've read, whether it's from years and forever ago or current or Holocaust or now, it's always about the unity the Jews find, the brotherhood that they make. How many have to die? And would you send your child again to fight? And yes, you would. You would, because there's no bigger story in my mind than being Jewish, being allowed what God promised. I believe in it. I just totally believe in it. And, you know, we've been through so many things. There'll be more things coming. And, you know, just watching what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. It's terrifying that we still stand, that we still fight, that we're still doing it, and that we assemble and talk about it.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah.
The hope in Judaism be different, like you said, laughter, building. How can hope in Judaism be different? Michelle Obama always said, hope wins out. So it's the same concept because we want hope to win out. It's just that it applies more to Judaism because all the years that we had to have hope to get forward.
Yeah, so I love that idea. I think, I don't know if it has to be different, right? I think the concept conceptually, the notion of hope is universal, right? But then there's also a particular message of hope when we think about the Jewish story, the longing for Yisrael of Zion, the hope that we return, right? This notion of hope of being is a constant link in a larger chain of tradition that brings us back and is part of that narrative, that story. You mentioned the idea of that promise being fulfilled, God's promise of the land of Israel to the people of Israel. Clinging to that hope is what got us through the desert, right? Clinging to that hope is what gets us through, thousands of years of exile and no longer sovereignty in our own land. Hope is what has to propel us forward during tragic times, even over the short, brief, history of the Jews within their land of Israel, right? The hope now of another day, the hope of more hostages being returned home, the hope that no more of our soldiers, men and women, have to die in order to protect the state, and defend the state of Israel. The hope that that our children and our children's children and our children's children will inhabit a world of peace. That that hope that the light of tranquility, of love, of beauty will far outshine the spaces of hatred, of darkness, of loss, of war, right? I mean, I think what Sachs is saying here is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the hope is different, right? Everyone's hope is hoping for something, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the concept has to be different, but I think what he's arguing here is that notion of hope as something that is a sustaining piece of who we are in our story, and that Israel as the home of hope, I thought was just such a beautiful concept, especially when we think about the words that were chosen as Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, the hope. Bobby.
I'm thinking the opposite of hope is despair. And I don't think the Jewish people, if you despair, you just sit down and give up. And Jewish people never gave up through every pogrom, every tragedy like the Holocaust. The Jewish people never gave up. They never gave into despair. They just, if they didn't have the reality of what they wanted, they still had the hope to hang on to. And that's, I think, what's kept us together is not giving into despair.
Yeah, beautiful. Maddie, then Norm.
I think our history is such that we've had to coexist alongside challenges, trouble, struggles, and a lot of awful things. And I know as a person that when I overcome a struggle, it gives me faith and hope in when I come to the next thing. Oh yeah, I did that. And I think our history kind of reinforces we've overcome this. We've, come across and we're still here after that.
Yeah.
Then that sense of faith, and because I believe in God, my faith is unlimited in the sense that I believe that, myself, our people, we're in God's hands. And that sense of faith gives me the hope, resilience, the energy to look at the worst of things.
Beautiful. Lovely, no, beautiful.
So when I think of hope, I think of light. I think of how important light is in our Jewish
Mm.
life tradition, whether it's lighting candles. And then I think of this Bedouin who'd been in a dark tunnel for months and hoping. And then at some particular point,
Some even Jewish.
Jewish people are rescuing a non-Jew, I'm assuming. And can you imagine what he feels or felt like when he came out of the tunnel, saw light, daylight?
Yeah. There's this amazing footage of his family running
Yeah.
through the hospital to go to the helicopter where he's being brought home. You mentioned something about the candles and how the lighting of the candles and how we're constantly bringing light into the world, right? This idea of Friday, we bringing light to individual candles, Saturday night, the braided candle of Havdalah, the menorah, Yontif candles, right? All of these ideas. And the image just popped into my mind when we think about light and hope also, is that I had a friend growing up who, she and her family had come over from Russia when the Soviet Jews were, had the opportunity to leave. And when they, came here to America and it was a Friday night, they all got ready to go light Shabbat candles. And they all went into the closet to light the candle.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, where are you going? Right? Like, where are you going? Like, we're going to the Shabbos table. And for her, she'd never seen candles being lit at a table or out and open. You only went to the closet to light candles. And so for her, making the transition, right, there's so many different elements of transitioning and making in life into America for her family. But for her, that was how you lit Shabbat candles, right? Like that was the norm. The idea of lighting candles anywhere else, like to her, that ritual wasn't authentic. And I think so much about that, especially when you were talking about this notion of bringing light and the hope that it's not like they didn't light their candles. They lit their candles, but they lit their candles in a way that they could do it without the fear of being found or persecution. And I still think about that is that even in this darkness, we're still trying to make some light, trying to bring that light. And that's still where that hope is ever present, even in spaces when hope could be an element that could harm or is dangerous. There's still that hope that's eternal. And so, thank you for bringing up that candle piece, but I was just reflecting on that and what that must have felt like to light candles outside of the closet for the first time. Yeah, Roberta and Robin.
I'm sure that in some way, this has to be connected with Tikkun Olam. But if you could make the connection on that.
Between hope and Tikkun Olam. So I think one of the things that I always think about with is where the actual notion of Tikkun Olam comes from, and it stems from the mystical tradition in which we're told that in the beginning of the world, God's light and God's being was contained in a vessel. And it became so immense and so powerful and so amazing that God's light burst open. And that's how the world came to be. And that all the shards of that vessel flew out into the world. And that our responsibility, our obligation is litaken, is to actually to repair that vessel. So the idea of Tikkun Olam is that each and every one of us has the obligation and the responsibility to, every time we do acts of kindness, of mitzvot, that we're actually collecting a piece of those shards and helping to glue it all back together. That whenever we engage in something, a part of that vessel starts to come back. The idea is that there's this hopefulness that the vessel becomes repaired, not whole, by the way. Repaired. the beauty of it is that the vessel still shows all the cracks, all of the glue that's bringing it all together, and through those little holes, that light still shines through those little cracks of imperfection. So the hope is that we're not trying to absolutely restore the whole thing to its perfect way that it was prior to it being burst open. But the idea is that each piece that we bring reflects a little bit of who we are, a little piece of the world that we're trying to repair, that sense of memory, of hope, of desire to repair the world, but also knowing that it's going to have those little lines of, you know, showing the action of us doing it, and then the light shining through it. That is that divine spark. So I think Tikkun Olam in and of itself is hopeful, right? It's the idea that we have to actually engage in this work in order to sort of restore, repair, bring back together a fractured world. And there has to be hope in that. Otherwise, why repair, right? So I think there's a lot to it. And the idea of shalom, shalom comes from the same root word as shin lamed mem, as shleimut, which is wholeness. So shalom, peace, shalem, wholeness. They're all intertwined in this active work of letaken olam, tikkun olam, repairing to repair, to bring back these shards that will continue to also spread out that light of the divine. Does that work? Yeah. Robin. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for me, the idea of hope among the Jews is a little bit different than it would be universally, because for me, when I think about how the Jews have been persecuted from the beginning of time, yet they still remain hopeful, no matter what they do to us. And that amazes me.
Yeah,
That's all.
it's not all, that's a lot. Yeah, did someone else have anything over here?
Well, I was just gonna add that I was thinking about that every syllable of the Jewish story. And I was thinking about how when the Torah is lifted up, like the light that actually comes through the paper, like it's a beautiful thought that even like when it's written down, when it's not recited, there's still that element of light. I don't know, it's always such a powerful image.
Yeah. That's beautiful. This week I was with the kindergartners, and one of the kindergartners, we were talking about all the people in my community. And so we had different visitors from the synagogue that came in to visit them. And so I was the rabbinic representative. And one of the kids says to me, Rabbi, yeah. And he goes, what fabric is the Torah made of? What a fabulous question, right? A 5-year-old. I love this. He was thinking about it, he really wanted to understand the fabric of the Torah. I was like, that is such a sermon. Okay.
Okay, and what did you say?
Beautiful.
I talked about first, I'm starting to think about, I was talking about parchment, I was talking about the skin of an animal, then I was thinking to myself, oh God, what are they gonna do? But then I talked about our own, like our own skin and the oils on our skin and how we can't touch it, and then we talked about feathers, and it was lovely, and the wood of the
A
scroll,
lot of them have
organic.
They have those little ones.
Yeah.
So maybe they touch their.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just great. I just loved the question, I just loved the question. I thought it was awesome. So as I was thinking through, as we were talking, this notion of hope and a hopefulness, and this notion of return, there's a distinction between this remembered land, right? If we're thinking about a hope to return, that means we're not there. And yet there's this idea of remembered. We are remembering this land that we want to return to. And as we've studied in this class, the Torahs and the synagogues and the temples in Jerusalem being destroyed, right? Continuing through the destruction of the Holy Temple in 70 CE, a failed Jewish revolt, and a subsequent banishments from the land, Israel became transformed into a remembered land for the majority of Jews. And for a huge portion of our history, of our story, right? Israel was a remembered land, no longer just a promised land, right? Because we inherited the land, we crossed over from the Torahitic days into the land. We lived there, we settled there, we were connected there, then we were banished from there, and now it becomes a remembered land. And like the Hebrews in Egypt, Jews and diaspora communities throughout the world related to Israel as an imagined land. A promised land to a remembered land to an imagined land. A place whose existence had permeated their daily lives through religious rituals, right? Prayer, liturgy, cultural customs, literary expressions and emotional ties. But nonetheless, a land they had never actually experienced. The difference was that Israel now became both imagined and remembered. As Israel's Declaration of Independence summarizes, impelled by this historic and traditional attachments, Jews strove in every successive generation to reestablish themselves in their ancient homeland. And so I want to think about those pioneers, those Chalutzim who were living in Russia, in Ukraine, the whole Poland, as they were, sitting in their homes, reading and praying and discussing this far off land that they remember, they imagined, and it was promised to them, yet it wasn't able to be theirs in that moment. And yet they yearned to go. And so these young 16, 17, 18-year-old children who'd made the decision to leave their parents' homes in the early 1900s for this far off land in the desert that, remember, they knew of as a land of milk and honey. And they get there and it was not, right? It was a swampland, malaria infested swampland. And they get to this land, it's near the Kinneret, is where they begin to settle the first kibbutz Degania and Kinneret, right? And Rachel Bluestein, who will maybe have like an entire series on her because she's one of my absolute favorite characters in this story of the early pioneers. She's known as Rachel the poetess. And she writes in her journal, she's one of these first pioneers that come to the land, her and her sister. They only spoke Russian. They knew Hebrew only from liturgy and prayer, and they made a commitment to each other that they would only speak Hebrew. And so they had days, weeks, months of silence because they couldn't fully speak to one another. They allowed themselves 1 hour a week to speak Russian to each other until they actually could speak the language. But she kept a journal, and she writes in her journal how we slept on haystacks in the middle of the fields. Each morning before sunrise, we would jump off our haystack and begin working, building, and creating the land of Israel. We labored out of soulfulness. Her words and the words of her journal became some of the most prolific, beautiful poetry of the pre-statehood period of the Yishuv, and was a major influence of Naomi Shemer's life. Naomi Shemer became, the major songwriter of Israel. I mean, the preeminent singer-songwriter of Israel. She's such an influence, and she's actually buried not far from Rachel's grave in Kinneret Cemetery. The people who are buried in this particular cemetery are the ones who came during this time, or whose families came during this time, and they settled and created kibbutz Degania. And Rachel writes this next poem here that I wanted to share with you because I think it says so much. El Artzi, to my country. Remember, free Israel as a state, right? This is in the early 1900s. And she writes, El Artzi.
Can you enlarge that?
I can't, but I will try. I'll read it. Yeah. El Artzi, to my country. I have not sung to you, my country, not brought glory to your name with the great deeds of a hero or the spoils of a battle yields. Only my hands have planted a tree on the shores of the Jordan. Only my feet have made a pathway through your fields. Modest are the gifts I bring you. I know this, mother. Modest I know the offerings of your daughter. Only an outburst of song on a day when the light flares up. Only I offer a silent tear for your poverty.
Yeah.
For Rachel and the people who were living with Rachel, these early pioneers, their pledge of hope was their hands, was their feet, was digging these trenches of trying to drain the swamplands. Their hope was not necessarily the big infrastructure that we know of a country or of of a modern state. For them, it was much more modest than that. It was the idea that with their own selves, their own souls, their own spirit, their own minds, their own ingenuity of trying to figure out how to farm. They didn't know from farming, right? I mean, they knew snow, right? Like frigid temperatures. And they get here and they have to try to figure it out. She tells an amazing story of how she worked diligently to grow the most amazing tomato garden. And finally that blossoms and it blooms and it's cucumbers. And she didn't know, what do they know, right? Like, okay, we have cucumbers now, right? Like, no idea, but for them, the prayerfulness, the soulfulness of working the land is what their hope was. They were living the hope of a return. And they were going to be responsible for making that return in whatever way it was going to happen, whether it was, through the farming, through the agriculture, through sleeping on haystacks. It didn't matter to them. What mattered to them was being there in this. And it had been for centuries reading about that in their prayers, reading about it in, from Herzl's, Zionist Congress, the idea that we will return to this place. And they figured out how to get there and how to make it happen and try to make it into something that was livable and breathable and to restore El Artsy, her country, to the luster, to the beauty, to the richness that they had only dreamt of. And then we get to Hatikva. So Hatikva is actually, the words are put together by Naftali Hertz Imber in 1878. Many years, obviously, before the state of Israel. And he writes these words. As long as within our hearts, the Jewish soul sings, as long as forward to the east, to Zion looks the eye, our hope is not yet lost. It is 2,000 years old to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. When you sing Hatikva, what do you think of? What comes to your mind? What are you singing?
My soul is transported to Israel.
Your soul is transported to Israel. Beautiful. What are you doing now?
Unfortunately, I'm visiting,
Mm-hmm.
but we still have a tie because I'm a Zionist, because I have family who made Aliyah, and I support Israel financially, however I can.
Beautiful. Who else wants to share? Yeah, Lauren.
I love the scene, even though I couldn't produce it right now,
Mm-hmm.
you would want to. And, I see the Israeli flag and I see the American flag and it just warms my heart in every way.
Beautiful. Nita.
I think the first time, it's about 35 years, maybe a little longer, that I went to Israel and I got up in the morning about 4:30. And I walked down the street and as people were waking up and I was talking to them, I began to think every person I'm meeting here is Jewish.
Yeah.
I never got over that. I remember writing it to my husband while I was in Israel, I wrote a diary. I don't I have to find it.
Mhm.
But I remember writing to my husband in that diary that week, how awesome it felt to me to be in a world of Jewish people, and I grew up in Brooklyn and Long Island. So I lived in a world with a lot of Jewish people. But this to me was mind-boggling.
Mm. That's awesome. Thank you. Yes, so else? Yeah, Robert.
So the first time I went to Israel, and I flew out, and as we were landing, they played Hatifa.
Mm,
I started to cry, and I felt like I was home.
yeah,
And I'd never been there before, but I felt like I was home. And that's how I feel every time I do it.
felt like I was home.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I
Rashida.
was gonna share that I learned the song at summer camp, so I was like 8 years old. And they really, it was part of our everyday, just raising the flag, but they really taught it to us at that young, impressionable age. Through that lens of hope, and so you would be there, and they taught us like, we are the miracle of it all, you know, that we exist and we're raising this flag, so. I love to hear this song, I love to hear children singing it.
Yeah.
It's just nice.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share your Hatifa moment?
I just enjoying the music, don't know the words, the translation in English, but in singing this song, the music and the feel, even though I don't know what the Hebrew words are, I feel the connection.
Beautiful.
I just, when we were singing Israel and Jerusalem, it's just wonderful.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Maddie.
When I was in Israel the first time, I was 19 years old. And I just met a girlfriend who I knew would be there, and we kind of traveled around. And before I went home, I bought a record. You know, the big records?
Yeah.
So there, I mean, I had like a little knapsack.
A 78.
I still have it, and it was Yerushalayim's,
Del Zahab.
Del Zahab. Yes. I
Naomi
had
Schultz.
all those songs on it because I kept hearing it through my stay. And I wanted to bring that back. It was almost like in tune with the rhythm of my body. Felt it.
Well, that's what Susan said, because the music is beautiful,
Yeah.
and I'm a
It just
musician.
fills you.
When I got to Israel, the first time was for a contest. I was in a contest for the harp, and I played the harp. This was 1964, and the soldiers from Jordan were still up on the rafters there.
Yeah.
And that didn't seem right. And I didn't get that feeling because I was so into the music, but I did return in 69. And I did join the Israel Philharmonic, and I was in the orchestra there. So at that time, walking to the Halag Kahut, I lived in Tel Aviv, and there was one TV station. So as I was walking to the concert in my black, I just would go from house to house watching, I don't know what it was, but the show kept going. And Israel was united watching whatever that was.
What year was this, did you say?
69.
69.
It was something silly.
No,
But
amazing.
that was my real image, walking from Rehov Weisel down to the Halag Kahut.
Yeah,
And being in the orchestra and the music. I mean, I just have music coming out of my everything.
yeah.
And so right now I see those words and they're gorgeous words. And I didn't know they were from the 1800s
Yeah.
somethings.
1878.
But they've been an inspiration, and my feelings about Israel, that inspiration, it's just really troubling now.
Bobby, and
Just
then
like
Leanna.
Robin, the first time the El Al plane touched down in Israel, I can't even remember how long ago it was. But you feel it in your soul. It's your soul that is attached to that country. It's the part of you in your soul that you feel when you land there.
I remember people getting off the plane and kissing the ground.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Still do.
It was so hard. It was so hard to transition when they built the big airport.
Yeah.
That it actually pulled you up to the airport. It was just so disconnected, I used to love, like, they parked you out in the middle of a field and you had to walk down this like
Right.
rickety staircase and all of a sudden the heat hit you.
She was 5.
I was 9, thank you. And yes, and there were many years that it was still like that, and then, yes, it became a real big airport. But there was nothing better than being sort of dropped off in the middle of a field and the heat hitting you, and you're standing there, and you dropped to your knees and you kissed the ground because it was so incredibly amazing to be there. And then to pull up in that little bus with the yellow Brufim Habayim L'Yisrael and that little tiny building. Now I walk into the airport and it's like, whoa, we've really moved up in the world, but you miss that your feet don't touch the soil until a little bit later. Judith, please.
Thank you for waiting for me. I had so much technical problems, but I'm on now.
We're here for you.
I too was 9 years old and went to a Jewish day. And we would finish the day by going outside, lined up with our blue bandanas, and we'd caps in Hebrew, which I still don't remember. And then we would sing Hatikva.
Oh, wow.
So many great memories. For example, when I don't even know how old, it was 1948, I know that. And the Israeli Navy came to Boston and they marched near our street. And we couldn't believe what we were seeing.
Yeah. Wow.
They had enough to do in Israel, but they came to see us. So we were important.
That's amazing. What a great story.
I remember the roll call.
For the UN, yeah. Oh, wow. Liliana, please.
In 1965, one of the trips that I went to Israel, my dad was the president of Maccabi Chile. So we were on the Chilean delegation for the Maccabi Games.
Wow.
And what it is to start getting out and listen to Hatikva, and then you have people from all over the world. And of course, I was 20 years old. We went out with this. We have friends all over the world because of being Jewish, but just participating. I participate in Argentina. I participate in Brazil. In Argentina, I play volleyball. But participating in Maccabi Games, it's amazing. It gives you hope, and you see country with 2 people, you see the United States with 600 people.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
Amazing.
Their own vote.
Yeah.
So what,
Their own vote.
yeah, so, there's so many, I love your Hatikva moments. There are so many amazing Hatikva moment stories. The melody, since many people brought it up, the melody was actually adapted by Samuel Cohen in 1888, and it was based on a melody he heard from a Romanian song.
I remember that.
What's interesting is, it was in the 5th Zionist Congress that they decided that this Hatikva would be the official Zionist song. And it wasn't actually until 2004. So obviously at the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948, Hatikva was unofficially adopted as the national anthem. But then in 2004, it was officially recognized as the national anthem. But I will never forget, there was this, at Yad Vashem, when they created the new exhibit, when they built the bigger building, the first time going through Yad Vashem, and at the very end, before you get to the amazing view, when you walk out, talk about hope. But before you do that, there's a final exhibit, there's a screen, it's a little tower, and it's a small little TV screen. And it's children in a DP camp singing Hatikva. And it was the most amazing, amazing sound. And then as you walk a little bit further and you open those big doors, you leave like that dark journey that you've traveled, and you get all the way to the top and it opens up and it's this magnificent vista of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem, with the light of Jerusalem. I think about like every time we sing Hatikva, it brings me, every time I hear Hatikva, I sort of place myself differently in Israel. And but that was one of those amazing sounds of Hatikva being sung by these little children in a DP camp who survived the Shoah, the Holocaust. And you think like, as they sing, our hope is not yet our hope is not yet lost. Od lo avda tikvatenu. In a place of such horror, our hope is not yet lost. I think about our hostages. I think about their families. I think about our soldiers. I think about just every single person living in Israel who sings this, Od lo avda tikvatenu, our hope is not yet lost. And for us, Od lo avda tikvatenu, our hope is not yet lost. That each and every day we think of this place. And it's a holy, sacred, magnificent, complex, rich, amazing, ancient, modern, high-tech, low-tech, dusty, magnificent, golden, divine space. That's ours. Our hope is not lost, but our hope was also realized in 1948 when we once again regained that sovereign nation. And I wanted to end today with Naomi Shemer's Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. I know it's small, but I will read it. So the Naomi Shemer, she writes this song in 1967. And it was for a song contest in Israel. And she writes one version of it first, because they didn't have access to Jerusalem pre-1967. And then after the 6-Day War, when Jerusalem is redeemed, and we once again have access, we also have access to the road to the Dead Sea by way of Jericho. She adds in the final stanza. So the song in and of itself is a hopeful song too. This hope that even though, yes, we're singing this in our land and there's, war and enemy around us, there's this hopeful nature of it, of having Jerusalem. And then when we do get Jerusalem, she changes the song. In fact, Jerusalem of Gold was actually brought up in the Knesset to be the national anthem of Israel. But it never made any progress in that way. But the song has such a richness to it and is so much a part of the ethos of Israel itself. So I'm just going to read the song itself. The mountain air is clear as wine, and the scent of pines is carried on the breeze of twilight with the sound of bells. And in the slumber of tree and stone, captive in her dream, the city that sits solitary, and in the midst is a wall. Jerusalem of gold, and of copper and of light. Behold, I am a violin for all your songs. How the cisterns have dried, the marketplace is empty, and no one frequents the Temple Mount and the old city. And in the caves and the mountain, winds are howling, and no one descends to the Dead Sea by way of Jericho. But as I come to sing to you today and to adorn crowns to you, I am the smallest of the youngest of your children and of the last poet. For your name scorches the lips like the kiss of a seraph, if I forget thee, Jerusalem, which is all gold. We have returned to the cisterns, to the market, and to the marketplace. A ram's horn calls out on the Temple Mount in the old city. And in the caves in the mountain, thousands of suns shine. We will once again descend to the Dead Sea by way of Jericho. As we think today of hope, of redemption, as we think about centuries of hope, of return, of transforming the land from a land of promise to a land that's imagined, to a land remembered, to a land that is alive, to a place that continues to inspire this notion of hope, of longing, this idea of strength, of challenge, of pain, of loss, of birth, of beginnings. It is a place that encapsulates all of those sentiments, those feelings, and ultimately it is this essence of gold and of light, a vibrant, shining light that helps to direct us wherever we are eastward. And even though we, as Yehuda Levi says, are at the edge of the West, our hearts are always in the East. And so today on our final class, when we think about our moments of tikva, our moments of hope, our moments, regardless of where we are, we maintain that strength, that hopefulness, that we will once again see a place that is thriving, that it is living, that it is no longer the place of hardship and captivity and loss and bloodshed, but rather it is once again that place that sustains, that nourishes, that thrives, and that keeps us ever connected to our spiritual core. Truly, Od lo avda tikvatenu, our hope truly is not lost. Amen. Amen. Have a wonderful rest of the day. This part of our series is completed. Next week, we begin Elul, which is the month that obviously prior to the High Holy Days, we'll have 4 amazing lunch and learn sessions. Each one of the rabbis will teach one of the weeks. If you got the email yesterday, you'll see we have 4 themes that we're going to explore together: awakening, gratitude, responsibility, and tshuva. And so I hope to see you all during those sessions and to allow ourselves to prepare emotionally and spiritually for the High Holy Days and to engage in the sacred journey together of tshuva, of introspection, and may it be one of spiritual fulfillment and joy. See you all, if not
Amen.
Friday, next week, in the days